Hey, hey, Pete, could I make a request? And that is, I have meetings last night, meeting tonight, meeting tomorrow night, kind of zooming out. If there's any way of streamlining this, I don't know if there's any way of streamlining the meeting, but if there is, I'd really appreciate it.
That largely, you could be a factor in streamlining. We can all play a role in that.
Okay, sounds good.
Just bear that in mind. Okay. So, so the highest priority is to get us ready for the public hearing. That's really the main purpose of the main event here. All right. So let me start. And yes, we will work hard to get complete our work soon. And I hope that we can get it done in an hour. How about that? Okay. So nice.
Wow.
Talk is cheap. All right. So I want to first of all note that this is we're meeting by Zoom. This is our regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Preservation Committee for March 9th of 2022. The agenda has been duly noticed with the town clerk's office. If you wish to follow along, we are on a Zoom app. The address of that app is on the agenda, as I said, noticed with the town clerk's office. And we are meeting remotely pursuant to Governor Baker's executive order of March of 2020 as extended by legislative action to April 1 of 2022. Meeting by Zoom pursuant to that language of the emergency order and the statute complies with the requirement of the open meeting law. So be aware, though, we are being recorded. Anything on your screen is going to be captured. So be careful what you screen share. Anything you broadcast may be recorded as well. The meeting materials should have been forwarded to you ahead of time. I think what we have right now is the agenda. I'll note any other additional items that we refer to. And as we've been making a habit of lately, is we might do a screen share with Cecilia at the controls. Ground rules are what we've always had in the last 2 years. I'll introduce any speakers. Tonight, I think it is just us. So we will go in alphabetical order when we have discussion items. And then from there, we'll do kind of a quick fire with hands up. All votes will be by roll call vote. First, let me check the technology and make sure that everyone can hear me and I can hear you. So I will use it to take roll call as well. So Joe Barnes.
Here.
Artie Crocker.
Here.
Bob Dermody.
Here.
Laura Dorfman.
Here.
And Reg Foster.
Present.
Chris Gerstle.
Aye.
Gene McKnight.
Here.
And Rick Simbone.
Here.
And I'm Peter Pingator. Can you hear me? I assume you can. Okay. So as I had mentioned in the beginning, what we really want to do is plan for our public hearing, which is scheduled for a week for this evening. And what we'll do is I'll start with chairman's updates. And we can, I guess what we'll do is report out to you both from Rick and I about our meeting with Dave Davidson, who's from the finance department of the town. And then also a report out on the select board consultation, which occurred last night. Rick was present and actually was present by Zoom, spoke briefly at one point. Artie and I were there as chair and vice chair. We were there in the hall. So first, with respect to the our meeting with Dave Davidson, Rick, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Oh, go ahead, Peter. I'll fill in the gaps.
Okay, so we had presented Dave with he had seen the memo that we had put together, sent to the committee. And we talked to him pretty constructively and directly about the issues that we were faced with, which really are issues that we're faced with kind of going down the road beginning in, I think, 2026, as I recall. So 2023, 24, 25. We're okay. We run into trouble beginning in 26 or 27. Most centered around potential requests for funding by the Needham Housing Authority. We addressed the issue of Emery Grover. I think that in terms of concepts that we talked about, he agreed with the idea originated with Rick that funding a part of it by debt, and that is just a part of it and not all of it by debt, gives the committee a lot of flexibility, especially beginning in 2030. I kind of explained that little nuance to you folks in our last meeting, that the requirements of the servicing the bonds in the town hall winds down in 2029, 2030. And if the servicing of the debt, any debt for Emery Grover would be funded in part by the required funding of the Historic Preservation Reserve Fund. And any additional amount, of course, then would come out of general reserve to service that. But the kind of general ballpark is that a $3 million debt could be funded with, generally speaking, with the amount of money that goes into the historic reserve. Okay. So not having an effect, a dramatic effect on drawing from general reserves during the after the period of 2029, 2030. I guess the kind of principles that we talked about were gaining a little more certainty over time, not necessarily now, but over the next couple of years from the Housing Authority as to what kind of funding we'll be looking for beginning in 2026, 27, 28, 29. And that would probably, and work with the Housing Authority going forward, and trying to gain a better understanding as to what it was that they were going to be requesting for in terms of funding and how accurate the requests were, how realistic it was, et cetera, but kind of over time, kind of fine tuning that request. He came up with kind of a general principle, which was, given the amount of the revenue that we have through CPA per year, which is roughly about $4.5 million, that funding community housing at $2 million is not sustainable or doable. But he also pointed out that we could increase when appropriately identified, we can increase our commitment to community housing, by a percentage amount, which would help us in terms of planning. So right now, if you think about it, we've made a commitment to 22% per year for community housing, right? As we fine tune those numbers going forward in the next year or two, and as the need actually comes through with greater clarity, the committee could make a commitment to increase the percentage of that community housing funding, either directly to the reserve fund or just earmark it in the general reserve to up to something like 30%, which would be kind of doable. And then we were just upfront with them about the fact that we've been talking to Park and Rec about pushing back some projects. And I think what I come away from that with is that we can work with this, over time, with an understanding that we do have this commitment that we're making, and it's coalescing around community housing and an increased funding about that. And the question really is how to avoid big spikes in the request and how to finance the request, and what's kind of a goal and what it is that we can appropriately fund to community housing in the coming 5-10 years. So that's kind of the takeaway from it. How am I doing, Rick?
You're doing great, Peter. Just let me, again, as I said, fill in a couple of gaps. One thing that Dave did mention is in their discussions with the Finance Committee, the Finance Committee is pushing real hard for Dave to not capitalize all of the money or not incur debt for all of the money being requested for Emery Grover. And so the plan is to basically try and fund, and I don't have my notes, but Peter, I think he said approximately $5 million with cash and the balance with debt. So he thought the strategy that we were discussing about doing part of it with cash and part of it with debt would fit in well. And the reason why they're pushing that kind of dovetails with the question that was handed out just before the meeting from the citizen who wants to know how is the town going to finance $300 million worth of school projects with debt. And there's a concern, and that's the finance committee's concern as well. And we'll hear about that when we meet with them. But they're concerned about the amount of debt that the town is building up, given what needs to be done with these two school buildings down the road. And so we're not the only ones that are kind of struggling with this.
So I think that kind of with those broad parameters, that's kind of, I think he's going to work on some projections and some financial planning with us, but I think that I want to hear from the committee, obviously, but I think at this point we want to get some further input, both from the public in terms of their priorities. I've heard from the select board as well, and I'll give you the kind of readout on that, and then we'll hear from finance committee. So I guess we'll just ask generally, does anybody have any questions about that? Sure, Jean.
Yes, with regard to debt, I just want to make sure I understand this. If a project that we say, yes, we will fund that, is to be funded out of debt, like some portion of the Emery Grover, is it that that debt is secured essentially by future income that's reasonably expected to come to the town, the CPA money coming to the town? If that's the case, then why is the finance committee concerned about adding to the debt of the town if there's a source of funds to pay for it?
Okay, well, I guess we can address that. That kind of goes to the formulas that they work on. Rick, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I can take it from two different perspectives. From our perspective, we're limited in the amount we can finance through debt because of the, first of all, when calculating the money for debt that's available, we have to assume 0% match from the state. So the only thing we can base our projections on is the 2% surcharge that we get from the tax levy. So that limits us. We also are limited by the fact that we already have incurred debt, so that gets subtracted from the number. And also we have ongoing commitments to put the minimum dollar amounts into the individual reserve buckets. So, you know, it becomes, from our perspective, that amount of money available to do anything with gets narrower and narrower and narrower as we go through time. Okay. So that's from our perspective. From the town's perspective, where the finance committee is concerned, is the fact that they're looking at potentially $300 million in new schools over the next 10 years. And that's all a function of how much money they get back from the MSBA and, you know, as far as matching funds, and also how much debt is available on the town's books. And in both those instances, they're looking at a substantial override to cover the cost of those two schools. So that's going to significantly increase the debt. It's going to increase the revenue, but they're concerned about how much debt, the finance committee is concerned about how much debt we take on, particularly as we look out to the future and anything else the town. They're concerned very much about the A rating that the town has on its bonds. And if we're too leveraged, then they're real concerned about where that rating could go by the rating agencies. Hopefully that answers your question, Jane.
So if you take on
Yes.
too much debt, you're going to affect the rating, which will then drive up the cost of servicing the debt.
That's correct.
And if you
And-
devote too much of your revenue just general revenue to servicing debt, then you're going to adversely affect our ability to keep our operations going. So when they talk about the 10% rule and the 3% rule, I believe that's what it is.
That's correct.
When you start exceeding 10% of your revenue to service debt, then you're going to have to talk about layoffs of your staff, teacher layoffs, police layoffs, et cetera. That's you can't get the money from everywhere. So that's kind of one of so they have these kind of benchmarks or principles that they try to go through. But both of those kind of push down the number, generally the number that they're willing to look at in terms of debt. And to finish it, I'm going to have a question for Rick, but it's just a short primer is our debt, since our CPC debt is included in both of those formulas. It's not a separate set of books, right?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
because
correct.
we're all one town. It's all one pot of taxpayer money. So we're subject to those same 3% and 10% rules. Okay, I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, I think so. Of course, this debt for the schools, it can be excluded. I mean, they do a debt exclusion vote so that it doesn't mean our budget has to be low under Prop 2.5, because the debt payment is separate from what we can spend under Prop 2.5. I suppose that's what you mean by an override, Rick.
Yeah, Gene, it is. Actually,
Yeah.
the 3% and the 10% number, the 3% debt excludes overrides. The 10% limit includes the overrides. So,
Okay, thank you. Good. Mhm.
Thanks, Rick. Okay, Laura Dorfman, you have her hand up.
Yeah, just more of a placeholder. I think it would be great for me, and I don't know, maybe because I'm newer, but to understand all the other sources of debt available or other sources of funding, whether it's debt or there's ARPA funds, there's DHCD funds, there's chat, I don't know. There's so many other funding sources for all these different buckets. It would be great at some point to understand what the possibilities are for each bucket for other funding. Not that each project is necessarily eligible for those funding sources, but I feel like I'm operating in kind of a vacuum here and not understanding like the bigger picture. So another time, but that would be helpful for me.
Peter, if I could just make one comment. Part of the discussion, and I might be mixing meetings, but part of the discussions about the whole financing package, as you go out through time, and we've done this in the past, and I think this was a recent conversation I had with Kate Fitzpatrick. She is very much interested in continuing to look at projects and not necessarily put them all in the CPA bucket, but there may be opportunities to either split the cost or they take one and we take one. They, meaning the town's ordinary operating budget or capital budget. And in our situation, in some cases, and I'll use the tennis court as an example. There was always some discussion about, well, should it be paid for out of all of CPA funds, or can that be split? Or should the town take the tennis court construction? And so those are some of the decisions and a way to alleviate our budget down the road if in fact we have a crunch and we need to spend money on something. It's been done in the past, and they would encourage that cooperative spirit to continue. And they may take something off of our plate and pay for it out of town's free cash versus our money. So to help alleviate some of this bubble that we might have.
All right, Laura, do you still have your hand up? Okay, good. All right, so now that's the readout from Dave. And then from the select board, I think that I basically did a summary presentation of the long memo that I had sent to them ahead of time. And it was a good exchange. I think that that was their opportunity to give us feedback. So you kind of have to remember that we're just telling them what we're up to, and here's where, that's why I like to give them the sense of the committee, and then I get feedback from them. It's not an opportunity for me to kind of go back and forth with them. Okay. So I think the significant things to report out are that we, and in no particular order, tennis courts. They saw that as that's one of those opportunities where if the number went to the $1.5 million number, that's something where the town would be looking to supplement the funding of the construction. And several of the select board members were very clear and about articulated a pretty good case about the use of the tennis courts, and that they're often in use. They've been in heavy use during the pandemic period. And so I heard that from several different voices on the select board, and they identified that as one of those examples where, because I expressed our hesitation about funding even the $50,000 in light of the fact that we didn't feel we saw the 1.5, I said, as a push. And I would say somewhat basically taking the position that we're not really in that position of actually financing that kind of project. And they held that out as an example of something that they could work with us on. The town dock was the subject of a rather spirited exchange, not by me on behalf of the CPC, but by Artie on behalf of the Conservation Commission. But it unspooled. And basically their position with respect to it was that we often approve projects that are still subject to other boards' review, planning board review of projects that get approved. One of the things that stood out what stood out with me was I recalled that after even town meeting approved the CPA appropriation for the redevelopment of the town common, town green, that it went before planning board after that. So that was even after town meeting approved it, right? Isn't that right, Jean? There was a subsequent hearing, right?
That's right. It was.
And they kind of held that out as an
months.
example. They kind of held that out as an example of, yes, there may be some other regulatory body in town that's involved, and then they expressed some urgency and kind of gave a kind of a position that was pretty similar to what Karis Lustig had said on behalf of the DPW, that the accessibility, and so there was a strong, I can't describe it in any other way other than strong support for going forward with the dock now. So that's there was response by Artie. I really don't feel the need to go into it in great depth, but it was kind of putting a flag in the ground, I guess, is that what Conservation Commission's role is in the whole matter. Is that a fair?
Yeah.
What, 5-word statement? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's perfectly acceptable, because again, clearly I was talking from the Conservation Commission
Okay.
standpoint.
Okay.
Perfectly fine, not talking about it now. Perfect.
Okay, good. And then
Peter,
yes,
may
yes,
I
sir.
make a quick comment on the previous discussion?
Sure.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but I believe you said dock. There's no dock involved, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Boat rate.
checking. Don't want any scope creep.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, so then with respect to the Needham Housing Authority requests, they were very supportive with respect to request 1, very supportive with request 2. I felt like I was being, as I said, an honest broker of information that, there's a path for funding phase 1, very unclear about a path for funding phases 2, 3, and 4. But they understood that we needed to go forward with this project, and we're strongly in favor of it. And they expressed support for 04 with the caveat that they noted that there was an executive director of the Housing Authority had recently announced a resignation, and they wanted to know what impact that was going to have on the proposal. And I said, I think that that's a fair due diligence question. that we'll put to the proponents, and that I thought that they were, I did again tell them that I thought that my understanding was that there was going to be a housing authority meeting, I thought today, maybe it's tomorrow, I could be wrong, where that subject of what they're going to do moving forward to for an executive director and a plan for that would be addressed. I did also note, and we'll get to this, Reg, at the appropriate point, something that when I woke up this morning, I realized maybe I was wrong in saying this, but DHCD has traditionally made available kind of lists of available temporary executive directors for housing authorities, and that they perhaps could be drawing on that list, and that DHCD was still a state agency that was out there, that was well positioned and well funded and ready to support its local housing authority. So we'll remain optimistic with respect to that issue. And with respect to the Militia Heights project acquisition, I think that they were not in favor, but they presented it as for two reasons. One is kind of an operational issue, which is the bandwidth of the housing authority and its ability to, they wanted to, its ability to focus on delivering its services and redeveloping, which is these are big obligations, and adding this adding this acquisition was another layer that was not part of the mission up until this point, and was a late entry, and they had some concerns that would affect the ability to stretch the bandwidth ability of the housing authority to go forward with its mission and its redevelopment efforts. There was another comment by another select board member that basically said similar things, but basically didn't want the housing authority to be distracted from its effort, its mission at redeveloping Linden Chambers, redeveloping and repositioning its HUD projects, HUD funded developments, and expressed some concern that this would diminish its ability to focus on those at hand. And as I said, it was not an opportunity to debate, but I did gently, I said, in fairness to the proponents, I want you to know, I'm taking your operational, I understand the issues around operation and focus. I trust you've read all the materials. The proponents would be kind of, have some rebuttal to that, but I know I'm here to take information from you. So already offered some additional words in support of the project as well. Let's see. I also forwarded to them the correspondence from the Charles River Center, and explained to them that, something may come of that, and we'll see how the process plays itself out. So they were aware that, and actually, apparently it's known that the Charles River Centers has had its eye on that property for a very long time for redevelopment as part of its plan to develop housing for the constituents that it services, which is developmentally disabled. And as we said, we learned in the letter, or as affirmed in the letter, most of those individuals are let's qualify as low income and good beneficiaries of subsidies with respect to housing. So it's a similar, very needy population. But I pointed that out to them because I wanted to let them know that there are there's a process being worked out right in front of us while we're going through this process itself. The Emery Grover schools, the renovation, made the presentation, talked about the range of feeling in terms of funding, anywhere between $3 million and $6 million, and put the question to them at the time, which was, if we do not fund more than $3 million, what will be the result of that? And one select board member said, the town is committed to this, and if you're not going to fund it, we're just going to be assuming more debt in order to fund it, and so the taxpayers are going to be paying for it one way or the other, because so that was one broad statement by one select board member. The chair basically took the position that this is, in light of the fact that we're dealing with some projections on trouble financing community housing projects beginning in 2026, 2027, and that 2023, 2024, 2025. We're okay. We don't run into trouble until a couple of years out that this project, which was, as the town has expressed a great deal of interest in, and there's been a lot of support, that we should factor that in their funding request. But I did say to them that, and emphasized a couple of times, and they understood it very well and were open to the process, that we're having a public hearing, and we want to get a sense of the public about what their spending priorities are, and then we're going to get feedback from them as well, and that we're going to at our public hearing. So Jean had her hand up, so I'm going to pause, and we'll have Jean's got a question. Jean, question.
Has the correspondence from the Charles River Center been provided to us? I don't remember it. Maybe I missed it.
Cecilia?
I believe so. Let me confirm if not, though.
Okay, I'm curious. I'd very much like to look at it.
Does anyone else does anyone else on the committee get a copy of this letter?
I received a copy, but I was CC'd on it, but I never received a copy, another copy from Cecilia that was forwarded to all the members of this.
Okay, let's get that to you now. All right.
Yes, that is my bad. I forwarded it to people for the meeting last night and neglected to forward it to the group. So I will do that as we speak. Sorry about that.
Okay. And so, but Reg, fortunately, you've had an opportunity to review it, right? Oh, it was direct. I think you were copied on the letter.
The CC on the letter.
Okay. Yeah, you got it.
The letter was to you,
Yes.
CC to me here.
Okay. All right.
If I may, one more question. I was late tuning into the select board meeting, but I did catch, I came in as they were talking about Emery Grover. And was there a suggestion? I couldn't quite follow it, that we would, if we reduced the amount from 6 million, would somehow be going back on our word or some promise we made? Am I wrong? I couldn't quite understand that.
I think that I didn't really read it that way. I could be wrong,
Uh-huh.
but I
Yeah,
I could be wrong. But they did. There was there was a statement that the town. Yeah, well, it was. You're right. It's pretty indirect, but it was there, which was the town. We had a town meeting. Town meeting supported Rev Mary Grover. There was a representation to town meeting that they would be looking for $6 million.
That's what they,
for
that's it, right.
CPC. And so what they're kind of saying is, look, the town meeting has already kind of given you the word here. This is that, they're expecting $6 million. That's what they kind of voted for. I think that's what the message was. And that may have, that didn't register with me that evening, but if Rick and Artie were there, other people who were listened in, you may have similar kind of view on that. Artie,
that's they said that not only for Emery Grover, but also the boat launch type area. They're basically stating to us that regardless of how it came to town meeting, what hearings are held beforehand, and I'm not meaning to put words in their mouth per se, but the town, it came to town meeting, it was voted on as something that the town wanted. And then when it comes to us, we should act in accordance to that, to some degree. That's how they're looking at it. Their expectations, what they told town meeting was they're getting the money, or I'm sorry, they're not getting it from us, but they are requesting it from us. And the boat launch was, similar type of thing going on.
okay. All right, Rick, do you want to respond to that? Or for any?
Yeah, I didn't quite read it that way. There was one member of the select board who was offering an opinion And that opinion was that town meeting wanted to move forward with this. I don't think he was opining on an opinion that said that we're required to fund this to the tune of $6 million. I think what he said is that if we can't fund it to the tune of $6 million, then the town will have to go back, the town side of the ledger will have to go back and come up with the other, let's say we only funded 3 million. The town side of the ledger would have to come up with $3 million that's not currently being planned for. And most likely they would have to borrow the additional $3 million to fund the project. I don't think we were being forced to fund it at $6 million. I got the impression that that was our call as to what we could fund it at. And if we could fund it at the 6 million, they'd be very much appreciative of that. And this was just one select board member's opinion. I'm not sure all of them necessarily shared that because this was during the individual comment period. But clearly, Emery Grover is one of the select board, at least one or two members of the select board's priority, and they would like to see us funded at 6 million. But I don't, that decision is in our hands, and they were just offering their comments, would be the way I'd categorize it.
Thank you, Rick. Okay. So one last item, or two items. One is Needham Community Farms application for developing growing beds. I kind of expressed our hesitation, if you will, or concerns. And I think that the feedback I thought, and I'll defer to you, Rick and Artie, because this was kind of the end of a long night when I was long session when I was on the whole time, but they were supportive of the mission of the Needham Community Farms. And I believe that one select board member was interested in knowing a little bit more about the revenue, the kind of budget, right? For, okay, how are they going to be able to, if they get this grant, we understand, what's the revenue that's going to come in to support this program? Let's just see it in black and white is really what you wanted to know, really. And so I would characterize the select board as supportive of the project and would like to know a little bit more about what the budget, the financial projections look like with respect to this proposed program. I think that's a fair way to put it. Really honed in on that issue. Okay. So therefore, again, just trying to be a fair broker of information, I didn't get a question from them about questioning the Needham Community Farms ability to set up, to stand up, as they say in this day and age, to stand up the program. Okay, they didn't. I didn't field any questions or comments with respect to that. Okay. And the last issue that we talked about was continuing the increase for the community, for community housing, the reserve fund from 11% to 22%. They were all in favor. Okay. So I think that's my report from both our meeting with our finance director and consultation with the select board. Any questions? Jean McKnight.
Yes, at the very end, you said that it was just a placeholder and you're not going to put forward the funds for land purchase. I didn't realize that. Is that right? We're just not going to put that forward at all?
So remember, we're a funding source. We don't look for the deals. The deals come to us and we finance them. Okay. So no one has come to us and said, we want to acquire open space. So, but what they do is, in case there is a late breaking acquisition available, they say acquisition of open space, $1 million. And they use it as a placeholder in case a $1 million deal comes along, and then they can identify the property. Okay.
Well, I know there's a lot of interest in the Foster land, but I guess nothing's coming of it.
Nothing has come to us, and I do not know. I don't know anything about it. That's another way of putting it. No one has informed me of anything. But therefore, no one has made an application to this committee for funds to do the acquisition. Okay. Now, and you know, Gene, that there are required funding to the reserve fund for open space, right? So there's going to be an appropriate, okay, you understand that. All right. Okay, we ready to move on? All right, so now I put this, the next item on the agenda was the consideration of the amended application for 2023-03. And I'm wondering if we want to table that or if we want to have a discussion concerning it. But we're on a lot of, we're on potentially shifting sands, or so I don't know what. This is an application by the Needham Housing Authority to amend 2023-03. I hope, has everyone gotten a copy of this amendment? No.
Oh,
Okay. So. All right. So,
I'm sorry, Peter, this was emailed last on February, I'm sorry, on March 2nd, I believe. I didn't see it. I didn't
it
really
was?
realize it until today, but it is in my email box from March 2nd.
okay, so you do have a copy.
I can forward it if any, or Cecilia can
So
do
does
that.
that mean, did you get it from, was it a general?
No, I believe it came from Reg, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Reg?
Yeah, I forwarded the amended applications of the chair to Cecilia and my three helpers here.
Okay, so maybe it didn't get to the group.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm looking at March 2nd. I
No.
see things about, yeah.
okay.
I'm not
So
seeing it
Cecilia,
at all.
maybe, well, you know, I don't want to intervene here, but some of us haven't, some don't.
Yeah, sorry, I think I made the same assumption you did, Laura, and thought that it went out to the whole group, so I apologize.
All right, so, all right. So, let's see. Well, Reg, my advice is to table the matter. I have some concerns about it that I would express as kind of chair, and so I don't know that we need to deal with this in light of the potential change with respect to the Charles River Centers being involved with the property as well. I will leave that to you. I guess what we could do is we probably could meet a couple minutes before the public hearing next week to discuss it and take a vote on it. I'm not certain actually that it is subject to a vote, but I'm willing to put it to a vote. It may be a chairman's discretion in terms of the amendment itself. But do you want to table it and request that we have a discussion concerning it after people have had a time and opportunity to review it? And that may actually be better, right? Because you may have a clearer picture about what the plans are for the housing authority with respect to this application.
The answer to that question is no. I won't have a clearer picture, a few minutes ahead of the public hearing, but I can answer your previous question if you'd like.
Sure, let's go right ahead.
Okay, so just for to set the table, for since nobody or half of us haven't seen this, the only two changes to the application was to raise the amount of money up to an amount that was equal to the appraisal that everybody did get a chance to review, and also to amend it such that if there's any money left over from purchasing the property, that money could be used for repairing the properties, because that was the other new piece of information I brought in last week. And then, like everybody, well, I guess not like everybody, but like some of us, less than 24 hours ago, we received the letter from the Charles River Center that I guess now the committee has in their email box right now. And that letter, I think just to briefly characterize it, stated Charles River Center's strong commitment as a board. It was from the board chair to aggressively purchasing the property. And I did have a board meeting that Peter referred to earlier today. It wasn't tomorrow, it was earlier today. The main, huge main agenda item on the board was to deal with the resignation letter that we just received, last Friday from our executive director, and to put in place a plan for the transition and a plan to bring an interim executive director on board, et cetera. So the large majority of that meeting was based on that. But I used a chairman's prerogative. Upon receiving that letter yesterday afternoon, I immediately sent it to our board members and said, I just got this in. It isn't really on the agenda for this afternoon's meeting, but I wanted to make you aware of it. And the sense of the board is that they do not have a sense of what their reaction is to it. I mean, obviously, we've been pursuing this very diligently for many months now, and they did not want to give me a sense of the board, and decided to put it on our next regular board meetings agenda, which happens to be the day after the public hearing. So that's where things stand now with the Housing Authority.
So then, Laura, you have a hand up.
Yes, and forgive me if it's not the right time, but so Reg, how does this recent event, or does it affect the request for the assistant director?
All right, let's deal with that, Lex. Let's deal with that next. Let's deal with that.
Okay.
Right now, the next agenda item is going to be discussing all of these applications. Okay, so let's just stay focused on this, but if that's okay. So the way I read the amendment, it's that the Housing Authority could use all of the $1.8 million to fund a rehabilitation of the property. Is that correct?
No, the application says that we expect to buy the property.
Okay, so what happens if you're not the successful purchaser of the property?
Then we don't buy it.
And what happens to the funds?
We don't own the property, so the funds would go back to the CPA.
Okay. All right. So there's a little bit of ambiguity in the language of the application. And then the concern that I have is that we haven't done is twofold. One, we haven't done any due diligence on the question of the cost of the rehabilitation. We got information at our last meeting, and I'm just stating the fact. Okay. And then secondly, we've already posted that we have a public hearing next week. All of the articles have been posted. We've already published. The information out there is this has to do with the acquisition. And there's nothing related to the rehabilitation. And the way I read it, without any kind of specs as to what the cost of the what parameters are allowed to in terms of using the funds for the rehabilitation. So my position on it is that I don't think it's fair to the process to introduce an entirely new aspect. And I don't see the urgency of it, because if you are a successful bidder, you can come in. We don't know, you can, that's probably the subject of next year's application. We don't, and so where we can conduct due diligence on it. If there is an application, if another party, Charles River, is a successful bidder, one or both of you may be before us next year for renovation funds, right? Because it would be in support of community housing, regardless probably of who the owner is, in light of what Charles River's plans are. So I have a lot of concern and questions of fairness, and fairness both to the committee and fairness to the public about what it is that they're voting on to allow the amendment to go forward. And that, that's my concern. I was trying to avoid having that kind of discussion. So that's, so if we want to go forward with it, I still want to give the committee an opportunity to review the application. I don't want to spring it on them now. I think that we can have a discussion about it. We can have a short discussion about it next time. But if you want to consider withdrawing the amendment, we can. I don't, and actually increasing, I think increasing the cost of the acquisition is fine, because we published that. And so that's not an issue. The issue that I see is the use of the funds.
Yeah, so I think that's a reasonable way forward, given the sort of late breaking news dimension of what's going on here. And, I certainly would think that we can amend the amendment or restrict the amendment just to the additional funds necessary, let the process play itself out. Maybe in a week or two, we'll have a little bit more information. And that's well before our, go, no go date of the 23rd for making the final decisions here.
Okay, so the 30th is our.
I'm the 30th.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
And
30th.
so we can actually deal with, let's assume for the moment that the amendment would consist only of increasing the amount.
Correct.
Okay, then I feel comfortable with dealing with that amendment on the night that we vote.
All right.
Okay, that even gives you more time, but it's that.
And everything else about the application is identical to what went in December 1st here.
Okay, so how about that addresses it? So we can, I guess we'll table the matter. I'm not an expert on Robert's rules.
Well, Robert's rules would say that I would accept the amendment to the amendment, and I'll resubmit it tomorrow, without the additional use of the leftover money for repairs language.
Good. All right, great.
If that's the sense of the board, actually, this committee here.
Sense of the committee, is that a fair result?
I just have a question. Sorry,
I
Jean. go
think
ahead.
so.
No.
Okay, question, Laura Dorfman question, and then Jean McKnight question.
I'm just wondering, Rich, what made you decide to change this at this late date?
A sense that we could acquire the property for less money. And also it really was stimulated by the very, literally a week beforehand, we had an opportunity to do the comprehensive assessment of what the repairs were. And for the first time, we were really able to sort of focus on what that would cost. And so it was our attention coming to that as well. And I sent you out last week, the list there. So again, things have been moving pretty quickly and changing every few days. So I think what I hear Peter saying is that makes sense that we stick to the original plan for now, and now that we have some sense of what the repairs are, and we're now starting to look at where the money's going to come for doing them, that's really not within the four corners of the application that was put forward in December. And it, the world isn't going to come to an end. It's not like some emergency. The good news is the properties are in extremely good shape. Believe it or not, they're in better shape than the ones we run right now. So if it takes a few more months or another funding cycle, should there be funding, should funding from CPA make sense, that can be dealt as a new transaction.
Right,
That's
and we'll
what he-
conduct our due diligence and, okay, good, great. All right, so, any, Gene McKnight, your hand is up.
Yeah, at our March 2nd meeting, I know we talked about the rehabilitation. In fact, it's in your memo to the select board with the sense of the meeting. We talked about the cost of rehabilitating the units. Perhaps we didn't have before us an actual formal amendment, but I just want to suggest that I like the concept of the incentive that gives to get the bid as low as possible so that there'll be money left over for the rehab. It just seems like a good thing to have that incentive there. So I'm sorry to see it be considered unacceptable, but we did talk about it. Do you remember? I mean, at our last meeting, at the March 2nd meeting.
But that was the
wait.
first time I just introduced that idea in all fairness,
Yes.
to what Peter's saying.
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah.
in 2020 hindsight, it should have been in there on December 1st, but it wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
And it's a question in my mind, speaking more generally as a CPC member, looking over all these projects of, do you want to make exceptions? There's a precedent to be set. It goes beyond any particular selfish interest that, a housing advocate or a Parks and Recs advocate has.
Okay.
And so I think what Peter says makes a lot of sense, is what I'm trying to say. And it won't get in the way of any of the potential, should we be able to take advantage of that potential, which starts with having some entity aggressively pursuing, purchase of this property. And I can speak only as like one board member. I don't have my board. This was a complete surprise to my entire board, like 3 hours ago. They don't know anything about any of this, less than, in fact, you folks know. This isn't, but from my one point of view, this may be a really good thing, the way things are turning out. We just don't know yet.
All right, let's, okay, hands up. Robert Dermody.
I believe Laura was ahead of me.
All right, Laura. Go ahead, bro.
Okay, thanks. Reg just referred to a phrase of what Peter said. Could you please repeat what you said that sort of summarized where we stand on this? I want to make sure I'm and the rest of us are clear. Thank you.
Okay, so that's good. What I had suggested was that the amendment changes the scope of the request, in my mind, somewhat significant. Okay, and by the way, Gene, the cost of renovation was discussed as an X factor dealing with the actual acquisition itself. Okay, in our last week's discussion. Okay, just to let you know that. And then which Reg addressed. So I want to be the reg. That's what my recollection was. Okay, so all right. So what I have proposed, and this is subject to the board's vote, I don't think it's unusual to increase the amount of the request as due diligence becomes a little more clear. And so Reg, on behalf of NHA, informed us last week that he was going to increase the request for the acquisition from $1.5 million, which was, I think, a ballpark figure, to something that is consistent with what the appraisal was, along with transactional costs in connection with the acquisition. So the appraisal came in at roughly $1.7 million. There was about 0.226 costs in terms of transactions, which brings it up to 1.826. I believe that's, I'm stretching my memory, but I believe that's
Roughly correct, yes.
okay, good. And so that is, in my mind, a fair proposed amendment for two reasons. One is it's consistent with the underlying purpose of the request, acquisition. And most importantly, Kristen Wright, who was running her own card game that evening, as you recall, was careful to note the increase in the request, and it was published at, I think the next day. So it's been up on our active website link, what their request is and what the amount is, 1.826. Okay, now that's a little presumptuous, but we're going to have to vote, I guess, on the amendment. Kristen, comment.
I just so I just want to speak very quickly to the prior acts of the committee in terms of funding. It has happened in the process before, and not just this year, but in previous years, where requests were put in December 1, December 3rd, whatever, and then during due diligence, the numbers have gone up and the numbers have gone down, dependent on more factors that have been received from the proponent. And the committee has never asked for like a formal amendment, and I just want to put that out there because things have fluctuated in the past, and that's just
Okay.
we've
All right.
accepted dollar amounts as like the change, but the scope of the project, if anything, like last year we had a resubmittal of an application because the scope of the project was unclear, and that was accepted by the committee, but the dollars kind of are up to discussion.
All right, good. That's an excellent point.
Point
So then why don't we go, let's stick with our past practice and accept the increased amount, which has been published, and there's no need to move to amend. Okay. So you can withdraw.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm on the website now. I'm sorry, it's not changed. It still says 1.5 million unless I'm missing something.
You may go ahead, Kristen.
It's the application does not change. It is the public hearing document that is being
Okay.
referred to.
Okay.
So
Okay.
for the public hearing,
Thank you.
because that
Okay.
involves other information as well.
Okay. All right. So now, we're done with that. Reg, I think that my advice would be to withdraw it. But if does that make sense to you?
Whatever our procedure is, yeah.
Okay.
Withdraw.
Withdraw. Okay.
And subject to it, being increased to 1.826 without an amendment.
Excellent. Okay, agreed. Now we're going to go on to if we have any general questions regarding all of the applications. So we'll go through them really quickly. We may not, and remember this, let's go through them quickly if there's any breaking news. So 2023-01, any information to add regarding that? Okay.
No.
Okay, good. 02, information regarding that.
Mm. No.
03, we have exhausted ourselves on that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, 04, this is our Housing Authority Assistant Executive Director position. Laura Dorfman had an earlier question. This is time for her question, I believe.
Sorry about that. I heard Red say something came up last minute and my mind went running. So do you think, maybe they're unrelated, Reg, but does the resignation of the executive director, does that change your request for the assistant director in any way? Like sometimes when one person leaves, you try to sort of reconfigure and say, well, can I just accomplish all of this with one new person that could maybe do both things, or no? Is this are they exclusive from one another? is my
Mutually
question.
exclusive. You can simplistically say the workload is doubled, in that box in the org chart, and what we will be doing is a full-fledged search for first an interim executive director and then a replacement permanent executive director. And I would also say that our existing executive director was kind enough, generous enough, responsible enough to honor. She has a 2-month notice period. So this is not happening overnight, and everything's going to be running fine through the first week of May. We just had a almost 2-hour meeting on this afternoon. And so we have time to really proceed forward with no change in our plans with the modernization and redevelopment initiative.
In terms of the search though, wouldn't you want to now focus on the executive director versus the assistant?
We would, but we already found a good assistant executive director, and it popped up, and we actually engaged that person. I made that person an offer a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And so we've got that, actually got that position secured a little bit in advance of the CPA funding. And this person that we've already identified does not have the full skill set to be the executive director.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so any other questions related to that, Laura? All right, so Rick, you just came in. I'm sorry, I should have somehow or another sent someone out in the hallway to get you, but I was unable to do that. So we finished with, we're on to 04. So 2023-04, the assistant executive director position. Do you have any questions for Reg related to that? Brett?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Laura covered them all. Thank you.
All right, you covered them all. All right, good. So well, can I just follow up, Reg? Just can you, because the select board was looking for some, I said to the select board that those were questions regarding the leaving of the executive director. They had a question about going forward with the funding the assistant executive director, but they also had some question about how does that affect. I thought that they were asking for some increase in comfort level about what the housing authority is going to do to fill the vacancy for the executive director. And I could be wrong, but I figure we might as well. I thought that was kind of a question. And if you could give us some sense of what it is, what does the housing authority do in this circumstance?
Sure. And again, mindful of this being a 1-hour meeting, let me just give you bullet points and then people can ask questions. So the first bullet point is, this is the fifth time it's happened in the last 10 years that I've been on the housing authority. So it's not uncommon for this to happen with small housing authorities. And there's a well-defined plan that swings into effect, not for the first time. And that plan was reviewed with our board this afternoon. The plan is to work with DHCD, who I had a meeting with earlier this week, to basically hire a search consultant to bring an interim executive director on board. And there are people who just do that for a living. It's kind of like when a head of school leaves a private school, they'll bring an interim in sometime. And then we also discussed the implications on day-to-day operations at our meeting this afternoon. And right now it looks like everything is going to be running smoothly for the next 2 months because there's no immediate crisis. And by then we expect to have the interim executive director on board. And then the other thing is, this is the, I don't know what to call it, the method and the madness of bringing on board the Cambridge Housing Authority. Part of the reason we haven't made any progress in the last 10 years is there's always something that comes up with a small housing authority. It can be ISTAMs that kick out people. It could be being unionized. It could be changeovers, executive directors. It could be COVID crises. And therefore, I've had a meeting with the Cambridge Housing Authority who can keep things running on track and on schedule and professionally for the Modernization and Redevelopment Authority. So we don't have any concerns to raise right now.
Okay, good. All right, that's good. All right, that kind of tracks what I said to the select board last night. All right, great. All right, so now we're on to Emery Grover. Any additional questions or comments by the liaisons?
No, I've spoken to Dan and Dan is comfortable and ready to go next week.
All right, we're gonna deal
No
with that.
further updates.
Okay. High school tennis court, Dermody and Barnes.
Status quo, no further updates.
Okay, the boat launch, Reg Foster.
Just a question on that. I want to make sure I understand what you said, Peter, about the future construction costs. Did you say that the select board said, well, you fund the design and then we'll take care of the rest?
No,
Well,
no.
Not
So
quite.
what they said was, in order to address our hesitancy in funding the design, because our appetite for funding construction to the tune of $1.5 million, that there was a lot of hesitation on our part. Their response to that was this would be of the type of proposals or projects where the town would step in and contribute some funds to the construction.
Okay, but not all. Okay,
Well, this was a conceptual issue. Yeah. And there's kind of a well-worn kind of path of doing that too.
okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. And then, so let's see. Now, I've been in touch with Joe Leghorn and kind of put to Joe the question, this is on community. All right, so I'm moving on now to the community
The
farms.
boat launch, yeah, actually.
Oh, sorry. That was not, well, all right, boat launch.
Boat launch. I have no new information. I tried to get more information on what was going on with the Conservation Commission, but spent several hours with no success. There is a Concom meeting tomorrow, and I believe it is on the agenda tomorrow, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe somebody else knows that.
It was pushed.
Yeah. It was
So it's
pushed again.
Pushed again, okay.
What does pushed mean?
Rescheduled to the next Concom meeting, so not tomorrow night's meeting, but the following one.
So
Thank
we
you.
learned that last night. What is the next scheduled? What would be that meeting? What date would that be?
2 weeks from tomorrow night, basically, right? 2 weeks from tomorrow night is.
The
generally
24th.
Yeah, yeah.
The 24th. Okay, so we're going 3/24. Okay. And let's see. All right, and then Joe Leghorn has provided us with additional information. Some of it I've already forwarded to you, but I'm going to work with Joe, and we're going to address these kind of questions that we're getting peppered with by, and what I anticipate we're going to get peppered with by the Finance Committee. And so I have a little bit of time to work with him, but he's addressing the issue of what happens if we fund it over. I'd first suggested 3 funding cycles, but now I'm thinking, what about 2 funding cycles? That may be a little bit easier for all concerned. And so I exercise a little discretion on that. And so I want to get a sense from him about what that project would look like if we did that. Okay. So we're asking a lot of him. I just want to let you know that, because they are a volunteer organization. And so I'll work with him with that over the next week, and we'll get some additional information. I don't know that it really impacts the application, his presentation to the public hearing. So this is simply our proposal. And so I'll work with Joe too on on the proposal, on this presentation. All right, so we have a hand up, Laura Dorfman.
Yeah, sorry. I just, I feel like we're putting him through a lot of work.
I
And
understand.
He's limited, and it's a 501c3, and it's food insecurity that he's dealing with and trying to help people. And there's not a lot of resources there. And I don't know. I just wanted to say that I feel bad and I'd like to sort of just be able to put him out of his misery and make a decision based on what we have and not keep going back to him for other things at this point. It's not
Okay.
a ton of money. That's
Right.
just my 2 cents.
All right, no, and I want to give you that leeway too, because you weren't here for the discussion, right? Because you had work demands on you, so you weren't here for last week's discussion. All right, so I'm glad that you did make that comment. I welcome that. Okay, and thank you. Duly noted. Okay, duly noted. All right. So now we have all right, so now on the agenda is, I just had this as a placeholder, which was discussion of CPC financial priorities. But what I'd like to do, and then discussion of sense of the committee, placeholders, I don't think that we need to address sense of the committee. I think that we've kind of done our work. I don't know that anyone has any serious misgivings about what their votes are, or excuse me, not a vote, or what their sense. And so we'll take in information from the public, and we will use that along with other additional information that's been provided to us in terms of our vote. In terms of the CPC financial priorities, I guess what I want to do is just now plan for our public hearing. Okay. So we have a lot on the agenda, and we're going to have a lot of public input. I want to be fair to the process. And Laura, do you have your hand up for some reason? No. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So, and I want to be fair to the process. And so what we've done in the past is we've kind of put out we've done schedules, like 8, and we basically blocked out what if you look at the agenda, what would be, 10 minutes for each one. That may be too optimistic. It may be that what we should, because what I would like to emphasize is no more than a 5-minute presentation for each article. Hopefully it can be less than that. And then we'll see how the numbers work out, but I would say that we could do, if we did 10 minutes for each one, then we're at basically 2 hours. I think that may be a little aggressive. We're going to go over. It could be that we, budget 15 minutes for each one, but then we're actually locking ourselves into a 3-hour meeting. I guess I would propose that we have 5-minute presentation and 5 minutes of discussion. Chris Kersel, bail me out.
Just a quick thing, like, what does the moderator give us for time for each
Okay,
article?
yeah, I'm going to get to that. So but the moderator limits comments that individuals can make. And so
I thought he also limits the time of how long you can speak.
yeah, it says what we generally do is kind of 3 minutes. The kind of custom is to say, if an individual stands up and says, I'd like to speak in favor of 2020 of the Militia Road acquisition, well, they can stand up and speak for 3 minutes. I can't say to them, you can only speak for 60 seconds. And it's not fair to the process. But what I can say is, what I'd like to do is not engage in a Q&A. If you have questions, you can ask them. We'll batch them and respond to them at the end of the proposal. That's one proposal that I have, okay? If you have a comment, please be concise and precise. No more than 3 minutes. I hope that you say things less than that. And if you want to stand up and say, I support what Mr. So-and-so said with respect to Militia Heights, that's fine too. You can do that. And so, but we should be mindful of the amount of agenda items that we have, and that we're trying to get through this in roughly a 2 to 3 hour process. It may be more than that. So and then we have an agenda, which basically I can rely on, which says, well, look, we're a little behind in our agenda. We've been on 2023-03 for 45 minutes, and we need to move on. Rick Zimbo, question, comment.
More of a comment, Peter. Given the interest in a lot of these articles, I would somehow suggest that we get the get the questions, if it's at all possible, if anyone has any questions, after looking at the website where all of the information is on the articles, that we ask them to provide us questions in advance, and we'll try and address them as part of the presentation. Limit the presentation to 5 minutes and then a quick response to the questions. And then someone, we're going to have, at that point, we'll be entertaining comments from the public. And, you know, we may get comments very similar to the letter that was sent in today that we received, having to do with, you know, I don't want you to approve the money for Emory Grover until we find out where the $300,000 or $300 million are going to come from the schools. I mean, we're going to get those comments. We're going to get people making comments about, well, we think we should devote 100% of the money towards affordable housing. So those types of comments, we just say, thank you very much, appreciate the input, next person. If we get the questions asked up front, to the extent we can, then that's going to help speed up the process. We could be here, honestly. I mean, I think people have enough interest in where the money's going in these particular projects to come up there and want to talk, and everybody's going to have their own little area they're going to want to push and talk about. And so I think that to the extent that we can minimize the speaking time and allow for just more comments, the better off we're going to be.
Okay, so let's break that down. So how do you propose, what is it that you propose to do on the front end, which was to minimize the questions? What was it that you proposed?
Yeah, we should put something out in the next day or two outlining what we're going to talk about at the public hearing, and refer people to the website and ask if anybody has any questions on any of the articles, because all the information on the articles are there, that they submit the questions in advance through Cecilia or somehow. And then we'll incorporate the responses in the presentations. And we give people 5 minutes to make the presentation, because, you know, I mean, as eloquent as people are that speak on behalf of their project, you know, there's going to take more than 5 minutes. So you try and limit it to 5, and you allow for some spillover.
And how much of total time do you think that we should allocate an additional 5 minutes for comments or more?
No, I'd suggest you allow people just to speak, and you cut it off when you start to hear repetitive comments.
Okay, that's fair enough. And then, so then I can come up with my 3-minute rule. Okay. And we can, if we get into yes. Okay. So, and then what we'll do is, if questions do come up, I'll emphasize that it's here for your comments. If you do have questions, we'll deal with those at the end. But we would hope that you could also submit them by email to us, and we'll address
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other point, Peter, is that if you let people know, if someone before you has provided the comment, we don't want to see, 20 people standing at the microphone saying, or looking to be recognized, because this is going to take time. We got people on a Zoom meeting. You're going to try and shuffle people in and out to ask questions. You don't want 20 people coming up and saying, I'm in favor of affordable housing, or I'm in favor of Emory Grover, or I'm not in favor of Emory Grover. I mean, you don't want repetitive comments. Trying to keep it concise. That's just my suggestions. If everybody doesn't agree and they want to go, then that's fine.
Okay, and then the other thing that I want to emphasize is that, again, this is not our opportunity as committee members to advocate our positions. Okay, this is the public's opportunity to take in their information from them. Okay, that's what it is. I've sat through several of these where no one spoke. We took in comments. There weren't questions asked. We made our presentation. We took in comments. There weren't questions that were asked, but we listened to the public. and that we did our duty and we did our business. Okay, and we took care of our business in that way. So I would actively discourage you from seizing on questions as a platform to promote a particular point of view. I don't think it's appropriate. And I also think it just takes away from the public's opportunity to talk to us. Okay. All right. Hands are up, Artie, and then Bob.
Yeah, I wanted just to, I mean, respectfully, Rick, I understand the same piece. We know this is, we know this thing is gonna run on. We know that. I mean, I'm sure we don't want repetitive questions going on. We'll have a question. There's no need, there really shouldn't be a need to repetitive questions. I hesitate to basically push back saying, if you coming up and all you're doing is saying support, don't do it type of thing. Because I think that's a point of that gives people a platform to say, I'm part of that quantity that says support. I hate to disallow that going on, but I certainly don't want to have the same question coming up type of thing.
Okay, that's fair enough. Fair enough. That's a good point. I don't, yeah, I will tell you that I tend to agree with your position, which is we want to make, we could say, if you're going to repeat what everyone else said, you don't need to do that. Either you can just not stand up. You could send us an email that says you support Mr. So-and-so. If you feel the need, you can come up to the mic and say, I support what Mr. or Ms. So-and-so said. Okay, but we don't need to have it. We don't need to kind of duplicate, right? We don't need to be repetitive, but you can express your support. Fair enough? Okay, good.
Express support, fine. Repetitive and questions different. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. Okay, and now Bob Derby.
With the utmost respect to my colleagues, we need to let everybody say whatever they want, however long it takes. period.
Okay, then we did that one year.
I really,
know
I
that.
really believe in that. I don't care if people stand up one after another and say, I support it. It does matter, even if they're saying the same thing. I believe in that very, very strongly. We cannot control what people can and cannot say. This is a public meeting. It's not our meeting. It's a chance for the public to give input. Thank you.
Okay, all right, no, that's fair enough. We have done it that way in the past, Bob, and I've got at least one committee member, was ready to quit on me.
Let them quit.
Okay. Actually,
We work
That
for
can
the
be done.
town. We work for the townspeople. Suck it up.
Yeah.
okay, all right. If it gets, but you'll give me a little leeway if it gets to be repetitive, we can move on,
Nope.
right?
Nope. You can't control free speech.
Okay. All right. Can I'll factor that in.
Let the people speak. That's all I'll say.
Fair enough.
One more thing, if I may, would we all be comfortable letting this meeting, which is being recorded, have everybody in town hear our discussion about what they can and cannot say? I would not. And that's why I am so upset over this. If I was watching this as a town meeting member or a townsperson, I would say the CPC committee is trying to control what we can and cannot say at a public. forum.
I'm not trying, but then you're misunderstanding things.
But I'm
Okay?
not
trying-
misunderstanding. I'm thinking the townspeople might, and I'm
Okay.
concerned about that.
Okay, I'm not, listen, I am trying, listen, we've had meetings where we took everyone, we went on until close to 11:30. And I had at least one member kind of hang up, as I recall, and said that it's time for the meeting to end. So I'm just addressing the fact that there's a lot on her plate and that there's a lot of interest, and how is it that we manage that? Okay, I want that to be clear. I'm actually a little concerned that you misunderstood that, because that's what we're trying to do. Okay.
I'm
And-
sorry
and-
if I misunderstood, but I just want to be clear that I don't want this committee in any way, shape, or form to be seen misconstrued
Okay.
as trying to control what people say.
Okay, early on in the discussion, we made it clear that the presentations were for 5 minutes. Early on in the discussion, we made it clear that we can go on for as long as people want to speak until we get a sense that there's repetition. You say that that's not good, we can should continue on, that's fine. All right, so I think that we're just trying to manage the process.
Well, I think
Yeah.
the main thing was like repetitive questions of the exact same question. I think it's fair. I think that's fair if it's the same question.
Okay,
People
And
have
we
a
prob-
right to speak.
it's okay. All right, fair enough. All right, so Okay, so I think that our goal should be to have the public hearing finished in one evening though, right? Okay, all right. All right, so we have our hands up. I'll just work. I don't know whose hand was up first. I'm going to start with Rick and then work to Jean and then go to Joe. Is that okay? Is that all right with you? All right, Rick first, then Jean, then Joe.
Yeah, not to disagree with my esteemed colleague, but the intent was not to stifle speech. But it was more to control the time of the meeting. I seem to remember someone hanging up at the last meeting after 4.5 hours. And I don't want to be in that position again, where we start to, check off, I got to go somewhere, I got to work tomorrow. So I want to make sure that we respectfully allow people time to comment, but on the same token, I don't want to see it turn into a filibuster for one matter or another. And we're there for 6-8 hours. And that's just my personal sentiment.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. We may have to make some decisions as we go along. Jean, you're next, then Joe, then Bob.
Yeah. Of course, the planning board has hearings all the time, and sometimes on very controversial issues that will go on and on for hours. And is it appropriate for us to say, this hearing is going to go on, but not later than 10:30 p.m. And if those who wish to speak haven't yet had an opportunity to speak, we encourage you to submit your written comments by email and then give the email address and put it in the chat. And we will consider your written comments as well as the ones that are expressed orally at the hearing. Is that something you would do? And what do you think of that?
So I'm opening up this discussion to everyone here, and everyone can actually speak for this committee. They can speak for as much and as long as they want regarding the format of our public hearing. So is that an idea and a tradition that the planning board has?
Yes, we certainly have done that. Yes.
Okay.
And then
Right,
we take the written comments. If we do a final decision, we have them as exhibits in our final decision, every single written comment.
Okay, so that may be a tool. All right, so I guess
The only problem with that is they will have to email me separately. They will not be able to type it in the chat if they are attending remotely, because we do not have the chat function enabled on Zoom. But other than that, that's not a problem from a technological standpoint.
That means the other people attending won't really right there now have an opportunity to know what that other person is saying. I realize that, yeah.
But I can also, for anyone attending in person, if this is something we do, I can have note cards or something that they can handwrite on as well. That's not a problem.
Oh, in person.
Can I,
I guess we could leave that as an option. Okay, let's say that. But no, Reg, we're going in order.
Information.
Yep. Yeah, yes.
So this meeting, to my knowledge, has not been posted as a hybrid meeting. It's only been posted as an in-person meeting. Is that relevant to this discussion?
I don't know. I don't know what the requirements are for posting the meeting. All I know is that
because I've been assuming I'd be attending in person at the PSAB building.
We are.
Yeah.
I saw a webinar ID on the town CPC website, but it's just the ID versus the actual link. But go ahead, Kristen.
In the public hearing notice and in the newsletter, it was published as both a Zoom attendee and an in-person meeting. So people can log in Zoom because it's not in Powers Hall. It's in Charles River Room and PSAB.
Okay, that answers that question. All right, so now Joe Barnes. And go ahead, Joe.
Okay, just quickly, going back to what Rick had said, I think it's a great idea to encourage those who are interested in these articles to review them on the website ahead of time, compose some questions and get them to us or get them to the proponents ahead of time so it can be kind of put into their presentation. I think a lot of time can be wasted on trying to answer a question that could have been answered ahead of time. And I do respect Bob's comments on not stifling, but I think Peter, you have a responsibility, and I think you take it seriously, to manage and to move a meeting along. I don't think you would stifle anybody, but I do think that you're cognizant of the amount of time that has to be devoted to giving everyone their fair opportunity to express themselves without allowing things just to go on and on and on. So I put my trust in your ability to manage the time appropriately.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I will say that the pub, in addition to being advertised as a hybrid, both via Zoom and in person, the public notice does also say to email any questions in advance to me already. So that's already out there. I've already started to receive a couple emails and phone calls. So
I remember that. I reminded that, Cecilia. Tomorrow, can we offline? I just want to talk to you about how we've previously managed the each of the individual. Kristen knows this. The individual applications. We put one PDF per application available for people to actually look at. I think we just kind of look at what we did last year, which I thought was a really good approach, so that people can actually download all the information and have it accessible to them. Maybe it's already up there. I don't know. I haven't checked. But whatever we did last year, can we do it the same? If I could just say it in that way. And okay. Just if you two could talk about that and then get back to me. Is that okay? Good. All right.
absolutely.
All right. Joe's hand is up. Are you, Joe? No comment. Bob Dermody, comment, question.
Again, I've already apologized. I will apologize again. I'm the one who left the meeting last week abruptly. I apologize for the abrupt nature which I left the meeting. For the record, I was informed very shortly thereafter that the meeting ended within 5 or 10 minutes of my leaving.
All right.
And
So Bob, that wasn't, my comment wasn't directed to you. It had to do with a prior meeting. It had to do with last year's public hearing.
Okay.
It wasn't directed to you. I would have been direct. I would have told you that. I don't make oblique comments like that. It involves someone who's not here, so I don't really want to draw too much attention to it. But it had to do with our public hearing last year.
And I'm, okay.
Okay. Do you want to make any other comments?
May I?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm very concerned about the public facing nature of this meeting. We're all working together. I know we work very hard together, but the public facing nature of next week's meeting is very, very important to me. And I think I'm just trying to make that clear.
Okay.
And I'm not insinuating, I'm just projecting a concern that people in town who aren't on this committee every week with us, understanding the work we do, they show up to a public, if they saw this meeting, I'm concerned that there would be, someone may construe it as that we were trying to control it in any way. And I understand that's not what we're trying to do. I don't want to stay up late either, but we have an obligation to the townspeople to do it. And I would offer right now that in the future, we may think of more than one night.
Okay.
That's just a suggestion for the future.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Artie Crocker.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on much more in Bob's camp on this one, because the fact remains is what Bob's saying fits with my philosophy very much. And that is that, let's step back and think about the fact that we've been going through this meeting after meeting. We have a lot of working knowledge coming up to this point. Essentially, very few people that are going to be coming to this meeting have that same working knowledge, and they're going to be hitting this with questions, listening, wondering what's going on. And so we have to take that into account. Like, I'm not saying 20 hours of meetings. I'm not saying that, Rick, trust me. But we have to realize they are coming from this from a completely different standpoint. And we need to respect that, because I will guarantee that I have felt not disrespected per se, but I have felt shut off and stymied with some meetings when they haven't gone long enough, because we're a public coming to something going, hey, we have questions, we have some agreements, we have some disagreements, we want to be listened to, and we have a lot of subjects going on here. And I don't know what the hell's going to go on, how much is going to be talked about, but there's going to be, if they want to talk about it, there's going to be a damn good reason why they want to talk about it, because they haven't been at our meetings, and we have to respect that fact. So we're going to have to give a lot of leeway. I think we're going to have to give a lot of leeway.
All right, fine. You know what? I personally am willing to stay for as long as it takes. Okay. I was the one who had us here last week until 11:45 or so. And I was the one who had us last year at the public hearing until 11:30. If I'm not going to be managing an open revolt among the committee members for having to sit through a 4.5-hour public hearing, I'm all for it. But someone has raised a good point, which is maybe, in the future, we should consider maybe having maybe 2 nights of public hearing. I don't know. I look, I gotta, I'm new at this. Okay.
I think part of it is making comments like streamline the process, streamline your questions, streamline the answers to them. And that will give more time for people to ask the answers versus what we see at Washington, where when someone doesn't want any more questions to be asked, let's say, they go on and on and on and on and on answering it. I'm not saying we're doing that, but we can streamline our responses to allow the public to have more time for their input.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Laura Dorfman, your hand is up.
Yes, and I'll put it down when I'm done. I hear everybody, I hear everything. I get it. I understand that people need to be heard, but there has to be some, I don't know if this Robert's Rules of Order, which is guidelines for conducting meetings, I don't know if this applies to town meetings. I don't know if it doesn't, but there has to be a framework and there has to be some kind of fence around and structure to our meetings. We can't just let these things go on, because after a certain amount of time, guess what? People are not with you anymore. They're just not. And the person who might want to talk after the 4th hour has gone to bed because they've given up. So the more that we can make these meetings efficient and deliver the message and give opportunities and help people get their points across succinctly, the more that will give time to other people who want to present their points. So with all due respect to
So why don't I do this? One of the things that I thought that I was going to say, and I think that we'll agree on this, is that I was going to.
So am I done?
Oh, sorry, Laura. Yeah, because I wanted you to be, because remember.
No, I'm just
Unless you talk,
trying to make
or-
a point. Right?
I
No,
think I
I
got-
hear you, but okay.
I got the point. All right, then wait a minute. Go ahead. All right, go ahead. No, seriously, go ahead. Finish it.
I think I made my point.
Yeah, so-
I'm teasing you. I'm sorry.
I thought, okay, I'm worried about that. Okay, so I think that we could, there are a couple of kind of admonitions, for lack of a better term, but one of them is to ask people, in light of the fact that there are a lot of warrant articles, there's a lot of interest, there are maybe a lot of different points of view. We welcome all your comments. We ask you to be as concise as you can to get your point across effectively. How's that? Can we live with that?
Yes, I mean, I think it's
We
fair to
can.
everybody, because if
Okay.
someone is allowed to just talk and talk and talk, then someone else is not allowed to talk, and that's not fair.
Okay.
That's not
Precision.
okay.
I had a judge say, be precise and be concise, but I won't go that far. Okay, but
Yes.
be precise and be concise. Okay, all right, good. We'll put out some principles out there and we'll see if we can go, but we do have some rules. No more than 3 minutes in your comments and no more than 5 minutes in your presentation. If you have questions, you cannot demand an answer at that time. We will batch the questions and do our best to respond to them at the end of the warrant article that we're discussing. Okay, how's that? Can we agree on those principles? Maybe yes. Consensus. Rick Zambone, hand is up. Comment. Rick. Can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I once again didn't press my space button. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit.
All right, but
And I just wanted to ask a question as to, we've got the presentations of the articles and we're soliciting comments and we're soliciting questions. One aspect of this meeting was to get feedback from the attendees as to where they would like to see or how they would direct us to allocate money across a number of buckets of money that are allowed spending under the CPA, and how in fact do we elicit them to provide those responses.
All right, so I have a proposal for that, okay, because I've been thinking about it. So I don't know that it's effective to put up the 8 factors. I mean, we can talk about the fact that we've looked at these and we're trying to assess internally and looked at some factors that we put together. But what I would propose is to say that one of the things that we want to hear about, we want your feedback, and we also want some sense of the community's priorities with respect to the kind of 3 broad areas of funding that are in play this year and most years, which is community housing, historic restoration, and open space and park and recreation. Understanding that historic preservation has an ancillary benefit of restoring a government, kind of a fundamental or core fundamental government function, similar to the restoration that we went through with town hall. I want to be an honest broker with people so that they know, okay, that if that's what he's talking about. Is that okay? That's what I was going to say, which is like in connection with your comments. And when you can do that, what I would say is you should do that in connection. So if you are a supporter of, for example, the Emery Grover project, because you want, and you can say in terms of, I would want you to make sure that you place a high priority on Emery Grover. You can say that, but I'd like to hear that in generally speaking. I think that that's the best we can do. Because what I found when we did this exercise, it was best to address all those issues with respect to each application. Folks have a different approach. I'm willing to hear it, but I think that's a pretty efficient way, because you're going to have advocates, people who are advocates for community housing stand up. I speak really in favor of this. I really want East Militia Heights. Here's why. It's going to add to the inventory. And in terms of priorities, I think you should be putting a high priority on developing community housing. I mean, right? I mean, I think that's.
I guess, Peter, my comment would be, how do we tee that up well in advance of the meeting so we get that feedback?
That is part of the notice that's already been out. It's part of the public blurb that I wrote that's been posted, and it's part of the posting that's up there. It's in introducing the warrant articles themselves, is that we're going to discuss these items as well as, okay? And so I can tee it up this way, right? So I can kind of, you give me 5 minutes, and I think I can kind of set up what we're trying to achieve. And I think it's really important to go one pass through. People will make some assumptions. This is a well informed group. They will have looked at these applications. And they will be able to state what their priorities are. Okay, I think that's the best that I think that's the best approach. Feedback on that. Rick, you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, I do, Peter. I just, I honestly believe that subject matter is probably going to be more important than the specific individual applications. And people are going to use that, the individual applications as an example to push their point. So all of those people who are in favor of public housing or affordable housing will use the applications as, the examples of what we need to do and we need to continue to do. Someone else may say that we're not standing up and we're not focusing enough on open space projects, or, I don't know, but I think they'll tend to use the articles as the basis for their opinions. That's all.
I think that's and I think that, to be fair, I think that this is really an issue that really should be worked on, actively worked on over the next couple of years. I do. But I don't think it's going to be resolved in one night, but I certainly want people's input. I understand what you're doing. Okay. Any other comments?
I have a suggestion. on
Sure.
the point.
Yeah, good.
I think the way things are listed in the order of what I think is the agenda for the public hearing, this question that Rick raised is at the end of the all the other articles that will be presented and discussed. Another way to do it is for you to introduce the subject at the beginning
Mhm.
and basically say, we will be collecting, we also are interested in your comments on this part of it as well. So if you have a comment, you should, and you're going to comment on housing, or you're going to comment on recreation or whatever, that you also add your thoughts with respect to, how do you split the baby? How do you deal with the situation that we're in, where there's more legitimate, reasonable demands for funds than we have funds available to give out?
Great. That's kind of the direction that I was going. And so a lot of it is on me in terms of teeing it up. But what I'll do is, if you give me some leeway, I'll put together my my proposed opening words, and I may still, get some feedback from some of the members, just so we're not actively deliberating out of public view. But maybe I might. So at any rate, let me work on that. That's excellent point, Reg. And Rick, I think I've got what I need. So any other comments? Okay, so a lot of it is going to be on me to kind of set up the ground rules. I think that I have some general principles that we've talked about. I think we're kind of building a little bit of a consensus around that. And so what I just want to remind everyone to get with their proponent, with the proponents, and make sure that they understand that it's a 5-minute hard stop. Not an opportunity, don't grab the question to run with more advocacy. We'll batch the questions, we'll answer them in the end. We will see to it that there's a nice package in a PDF format with respect to each of the applications up on the website, the way we did it last year. And Cecilia has already pointed out that we've already asked them for questions ahead of time by email. We'll figure out another method for doing that as well, getting that word out as well, that as Rick had suggested. Okay. Does everybody do we feel okay about this? All right. Okay. All right, good. Everybody's good, right?
I
Right.
also did ask all of the proponents to send me any documents by Friday so I could post it with the agenda so that the public would have time to look at any presentation documents ahead of time.
Okay, good. All right.
Friday at
Can I
noon,
just-
if I recollect.
Friday at noon. Right.
Yeah.
Friday at noon, Reg. Okay.
Knowing that I will probably get some at like 3 p.m, but
Of course.
So Celia, if I may, I mean, I understand they people send these things to you like last minute, and you just have to just throw them up there and give them to us. But I think in this circumstance, we really can't, I don't think it's fair to anybody for us to get the stuff like the day of, or even the day before. If there could be a hard deadline on that. I don't know how everybody else feels, but it's just really tough to get stuff that same day, right? And then be ready for a meeting, never mind a public hearing.
yeah, I intend on, well, I have to get the agenda posted Monday the latest, and I never feel comfortable posting it on Monday, so I always send it on Friday. So my intent is to send it to the town clerk by Friday afternoon at 4, and if it's not included then it's not going to be included.
Okay. So that's, let's see, I think that I've covered, I think we've covered presentations and planning for our meeting. I don't think we have any, do we have another batch of minutes this week, Kristen, or not? We're okay, no minutes.
Last
Um,
week's weren't approved.
Question about the minutes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Wait.
I had said last time that I would do a red line because I reviewed them, and like each set of minutes had about 8 things that I thought should be like missing words, nothing substantive. But I found I didn't get around to it until yesterday. And what I found is what had been sent was a PDF, and I couldn't review and redline it in Word. And so I emailed you, Kristen, or maybe it was Cecilia. email, both of you.
I was out of the office all day, Jean, so unfortunately I didn't
okay.
get that
Yeah,
earlier.
asking, please send it in Word format and I'll very quickly turn it
Do you
around.
have them quickly now that we can get them done, unless in case anybody else has substantive changes as well?
I just don't want to take
And I
up
apologize,
time
Peter. That was just my
at
that's
9
just my question.
PM
Sorry.
going through 8 changes in each minute. Do you want to?
Now, let's do that on the 23rd.
Okay.
All right, or
Okay.
rather.
And
on
in the
the,
meantime, I'll just have a quick red line. Everybody will see it. Everybody will say, fine. I feel as though they will. So
Okay.
if somebody could just, Cecilia or Christian, just get those 2 documents to me in Word, I'll get them out right away.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you, Kristen. Okay. All right. Do we have any other items that we want to discuss? All right, nothing. All right, good. So that's it for my agenda. All right. So I'm going to next see you next week in person. I think that my proposal would be to meet in person going forward. Let's take advantage of the known unknowns that we're living with right now. So which are pretty appears to be pretty low risk. If you feel comfortable with that, I would like to do that. That means that we would meet in person on the 30th. Okay. We'll meet, we're also going to meet in person next week with okay. I hope that everyone can be there in person, and then but we will also have participants through Zoom. Is that everyone's understanding? Yes. Peter.
Just a question. Is the place we're meeting, did you say the Charles River Room at the Public Service Administration Building?
Yes.
Yes.
That's right. That's a relatively small room. How many people do you usually have at your hearings?
Well, 6. So, but
Okay.
okay, but it's true. But that's not going to be this case. See, this is how things always work out really well like this. But people may be hanging from the rafters. But we'll see. There are other people who talked about the footprint and thought, oh yeah, we'll be okay.
Okay.
There was a highly publicized event in Powers Hall that I could not kick out.
Yeah, there was a reason
Yeah.
for that. Oh, I want to point that out. We tried to get Powers Hall. We
Yeah.
were shut out. Okay.
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 Well, I'll be glad to be back in the Charles River Room. It's a very familiar place for 15 years of being on the planning board.
Okay. All right. And okay, now let's have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. And that's by Artie Crocker. And
Second,
Chris, I saw you chomping at the bit there, buddy.
Chris Gersel.
didn't get out of fast enough.
Okay, good. All right. Discussion, hearing none. Let's have a vote. Joe Barnes.
Either Joe's frozen.
No, he's
I
Artie Crocker,
Aye.
Bob Dermody,
Aye.
Chris Gersel,
Aye.
Reg Foster,
Yes.
Laura Dorfman,
Aye.
Jean McKnight,
All right.
Rick Simbo.
Aye.
Reg, I'm sorry, did I call you?
Yes, you did.
I thought so. Okay. And the chair votes aye. Okay, so we are adjourned and we'll see you.
See you next
Thank
week.
you, Peter. It's 9:01. Good job.
Okay, we can
Bye,
watch
gang.
the Celtics. Okay.